like the kickoff to the running season. It happens in April. And so, or like March, like end of March-ish. So that's the first race that I'll have on the calendar. And then I have Grandma's Half, which I've done before, and I love it. So I'm excited to go back and do that. Kind of hoping now that Dakota, she won't be running it. I don't know if she'll be there at that time. I think the Olympics, she'll be gone by then, but I was kind of hoping that she might still be there. So that's like her race and her community there.
There's a glimmer.
Exactly. Maybe there's a hope. Maybe they don't leave for the Olympics quite yet by then. And especially the marathon. I think the marathon's later on in the Olympic schedule. So I'll have the Grandma's Half in June, and then Chicago Marathon in October.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah. And then lots of other little races interspersed, but those are the big main ones that I was like, I'm going to sign up when it first opens versus waiting till the last minute like I usually do.
Absolutely. You need to come to Kansas City again when I'm actually here. That would be great.
Yeah.
I had to bail last time.
That one will most likely be on the calendar too. It's usually after Chicago Marathon. My husband and I love doing the Kansas City Half Marathon, the Garmin one. They do a great job.
They do.
And it's hilly. So it's weird that we like it, but we actually really like that course.
You know, there's a spring half that they do here as well, half and marathon, I believe. That's also sponsored by Garmin.
Oh,
so just gonna seed that, put that there, see if it grows. But anyway, so let's jump in. I haven't thanked you yet. Thank you for coming on. We always get like an amazing amount of questions for you, and then an amazing amount of really in-depth, applicable information, and it's very helpful. And I know some people do work with you one-on-one, but a lot of people just need tweaking, and this is helpful to get other people just thinking about what they can do better to support their running and their overall health better. So I just am really thankful and grateful when you're always on board for coming and talking with us. So
absolutely. I always love coming and talking to you guys. It's a great team.
So the first question that we have is about intaking fluids, water, etc. during the winter. So this person really has a hard time just carrying fluids, wanting to drink with anything under like 14 to 16 miles. And they're really wondering, like, is dehydration a thing to really be aware of in the winter, or can they focus on body cues? And do they need to be carrying during shorter runs and still sipping like we do in the summer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on your locale. It's definitely something to take into consideration. But when I'm talking and I'm thinking about winter, I'm thinking of colder locations, and colder being like where your water bottle might freeze, or it would be get really cold or something like that. And that's understandable, not wanting to have to carry something. But overall, in the wintertime, dehydration is actually more common or more likely than in the summer, because there's a lot of research to show that the thirst, that body cue thirst, is definitely suppressed in the winter time more often. So it's not a great time to rely on your body cues to hydrate. And another body cue that we oftentimes use as well is sweating, but we're usually wearing longer sleeves or clothing, so we don't notice that we're sweating if we are. And so oftentimes we can become more dehydrated than we realize. So I always like to recommend thinking about, the air in your work or your home. If you have drier, like heat is oftentimes a lot drier, so you're dehydrating your body more. You might be waking up and have like a dry mouth more often than you would in the summertime when you're more focused on hydration in that time frame. So winter, definitely dehydration is something to pay attention to. How do we kind of counteract that? Just work on your daily hydration. I'm not somebody who's going to say, take a handheld with your gloves and, make sure you got everything for your water in. You have to carry it while you're out there. But I think that if you hydrate really well in your day to day, and that can include water, that can include any electrolyte drinks, that can include teas. So a lot of times people might do like hot tea or something, occasional coffees that are like, not highly sugar, because we just don't, anything that's more Low sugar or unsweetened beverages count towards that hydration oftentimes. If we get too high in sugar, sometimes that can dehydrate in some cases. So we'd count like half of a fluid that would be higher sugar as your total fluid intake. But you'd want to try to get about 80 to 100 fluid ounces, usually as an endurance athlete, in your day-to-day when it comes to water. But just do it before and after your runs. Doesn't mean if you're doing those longer distances, you have to carry something with you. Just focus on before and after and daily, and you should be good. You shouldn't necessarily have to take something with you if it's a shorter run than what you're typically used to taking out more fluids.
Makes sense. So I have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Because the research over the past like 20 years has been all kinds of blurry and fuzzy, and that's mixed with tons of myths out there and who knows, New York Times articles, and nothing against New York Times, I love them, but just random stuff in the media about caffeine and its impact on our fluid levels in our body, and if it's a diuretic, if it's not. Like what is the latest research out there on that?
Yeah, so coffee can be a diuretic for some individuals. So it depends on the situation for a lot of people. But what I always like to say is coffee in itself is not dehydrating as long as you're not depending on coffee as your only form of fluid intake. This is a common question that does come up pretty often because that research is a little old school. There's recommendations like coffee doesn't hydrate you, and it's less about coffee not hydrating you and more about balance and understanding that you can have your coffee, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be drinking water as well. A lot of times the research that was showing coffee being dehydrating, oftentimes it was showing that people were just not drinking other fluids. They were drinking primarily water or primarily coffee throughout their day. And there's a lot of caffeine in there too. And so they weren't drinking enough water to kind of support their other body's needs because that's what they need. Your body is, over 60% fluid, and water, you need to make sure you're taking in water in that time. So no, coffee will not dehydrate you within reason. Yes, you still need to make sure you're hydrating and taking in water as well.
Fair. Yeah. I have like 3 follow-up questions, but I'm not the one that's supposed to be asking questions, so I'm going to go on. So when someone is running first thing in the morning, this person wants to know, is it best to fuel beforehand? They tend to bonk very quickly on morning runs. My follow-up that I feel like would be easier just to add on would be that, like, depending on how you answer your question, is that answer different for male versus female? Especially when we talk about fasted runs in general, maybe not even just a morning run, although that's more fasted than others can be.
Yeah. So this is a great question because a lot of people tend to like to try to do fasted runs, especially in the morning. And there's a multitude of reasons why this can be the case. For some people, it might sit better in their stomach. Like if they don't have anything, they feel like they run a little bit better. For some people, they bonk and they have issues with taking in anything, but it causes GI issues for them. There's a lot of different reasons why they might be fasted. They don't want to wake up really early. There's a lot of factors. But what I always like to say is from a pre-fuel standpoint, you want to keep it simple. So if you're waking up in the morning and you're going to get out the door within 10, 15 minutes, maybe more if you have that dynamic warm-up that you're supposed to be doing. Yes, exactly. So you might need a little bit more time. Keep it straightforward and simple types of things. So like applesauce. If you have kids in your house, use a go-go squeeze. I mean, those are pretty common in a lot of like households, or like getting little cups of applesauce. That's a quick, easy thing that's very fast to digest. It should not upset your stomach, and it's a way to kind of get in a little bit of energy before going out so you don't bonk on runs. This is something that is really good to do from a pre-fuel standpoint if you're doing especially quality runs. Now, every run that can be incorporated too, and it can be beneficial to do a pre-fuel. But if we're kind of being picky for some people, I would say do something that is going to be I lost my train of thought there. Sorry. You want to make sure you do a pre-fuel for those quality sessions, because that's more likely you're going to bonk in those quality sessions.
Yeah.
And when I use the term quality session, I don't know if that's what you guys use in your team, but I'm talking about tempo workouts, track workouts, long runs, progression runs. Those are what I consider quality sessions. And so that's where you do want that energy, because you're going to be pushing down on that gas pedal. You're going to be using energy more. Then you're out there in a zone 2 or zone 2 type of run, super easy conversational pace. You may not need that pre-fuel, and that's okay. But more of those quality sessions, pre-fuel is an important factor. And this goes into that add-on of male versus female. For fasted, I say male, female, both quality sessions, they should be pre-fueling, both male and female. If we're talking about something that's not super high intensity or not super long period of time out, there is a gender difference in fasted workouts. And this more common in the mornings than it is in the evenings. But if we're talking about morning workouts, males tend to respond a lot better to fasted workouts. The research has shown that if they're doing intermittent fasting or fasted workouts, they tend to see an increase in muscle protein synthesis. They tend to see an increase in their testosterone, which obviously builds up that muscle. They tend to see an improvement in their endurance, and then also usually see a decrease in body fat percentage, body composition. Men tend to see that. Versus women, we do not see that. They oftentimes see a lot of research when they're actually looking at fasting for women in workouts. They are looking at the fact that females tend to have higher cortisol levels. Generally speaking, in the morning, your cortisol levels are going to be their highest, both men and women. But then when you add fasted workouts into that, especially in higher intensity, then that's when oftentimes you can start to see an increase in body fat percentage for a lot of women. Sometimes that's a struggle too, because it's messing with your hormones. And so by seeing that increase in body fat, the change in those hormones, it can disrupt your sleep. It can disrupt your body's ability to build muscle. Now, granted, this is for more premenopausal type of women, but even the menopausal and postmenopausal women doing a fasted workout, the pre-fuel looks a little different potentially for those individuals, but doing a completely fasted workout still is going to be not as beneficial in the long term as they may think it will be, especially for a lot of women. They may think that this goal of fasted workout is going to improve their body composition, when in reality for women, because of our hormones, it's actually going to have the reverse effect that they're intending to do.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, not talking about fasted workouts in general, what is the shortest run that you suggest people start fueling or utilizing fueling during?
Yeah, so the shortest amount of run I would say is, for most individuals, generally speaking, I say 60 minutes. If your run is 60 minutes or less, you don't really need to really utilize a fueling beforehand. Some individuals, they may need 45 minutes. That might be more of that range. So if you're doing anything more than 45 minutes, doing a little pre-fuel can be beneficial. I would say probably more women that I've worked with, I would say 45 minutes is more the standard that I use for them, whereas men oftentimes is 60 minutes is that standard I typically use for them. But I would say anything over 60 minutes, that's where you could utilize, that's definitely where you utilize a pre-fuel. But it's also where you can kind of utilize like a gel or a nutritional interpretation or incorporation there, whether it be real food or it be a gel or chew or something. This is where you can add that in. Even if it's only going to be another 15 minutes, that helps your recovery kind of jumpstart itself.
Yeah, for sure. And does that go the same? Does that time frame or general rule of thumb for that time frame, can it be blanketed to workouts as well? Or if somebody is running, because we talked about the intensity factor before, do they need to think about in-run fueling differently in regards to gels or whole food during a workout versus just a regular run like we're talking about now?
Yeah, so with quality sessions, like a track workout, a tempo, anything like that, I always like to recommend to try to do a gel or a liquid powder of some kind, because you're hopefully maybe have hydration out there. I do recommend that. And the main reason I recommend, even if you're only out there for 45 minutes or the quality session portion is only, 30 minutes or something like that, the reason I recommend doing a gel or doing whatever you're going to use on race day is because when you're doing those quality sessions, your heart rate is going to be a lot higher than it's going to be on a zone 2 type of workout. Well, guess what? Your digestive tract works very differently in different heart rate zones for a lot of individuals. So knowing that you can digest one take and then digest the type of nutrition you want to do in run, when you are pushing down on that gas pedal, when your breathing is kind of changed, when your heart rate is different, if you can do that, then you're not going to be frazzled in a race when you have things we talked about last time go awry and the heart rate might start to increase and things start to happen. How can you make sure that you're still getting that fuel in when your heart rate is higher, changing up your digestive tract, all of those different factors? So I do recommend testing out your fuel to make sure it's good for race day in those quality sessions. In addition, that allows for you not to definitely bonk at the end of that last set, helps for you to still keep consistency in your training, in your times and what you're hitting and your marks in that last little bit as well.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Like, it's quality sessions, but that just doesn't mean only progressive runs or only these longer runs with a higher intensity somewhere mixed in. Like, that's even, track workouts and stuff, like utilizing that too is going to be better for recovery and better for the whole quality session. So that kind of leads, go ahead.
No, I was going to say too, just from experience too, when I'm at the track, I'm definitely not the fastest one when I go to the track or by any means. And we have all the different styles of runners. And, I'm one of the few ones that actually is taking gels while I'm out on the track. And I think I see it more and more. And I try to advocate for people to like, hey, you need to be learning how to take these things when your body is at a different training, it's not only just long runs taking fuel. Guess what? Race day might not only look like the way your long run looked. You might want to test it out like an early morning or, changing up that kind of strategy for your fueling on a race day. So it is really beneficial in that way too.
I agree. And we had some questions about race day as well. So one person asked if there's any benefit to fueling during a shorter race. They see some people taking gels during or before a 5K even. Is this even helpful or is it, superfluous?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say that if they're taking it before the actual, like a 5K, for example, or a 10K, then oftentimes that's just their pre-fuel. I mean, that's the same kind of process you would do if you were in a half marathon or a full marathon. If you had to get into a corral a little bit earlier than expected, so you might not have had time to eat something, a gel taking right before the start is a pre-fuel possibility. So they're not carrying it on them and taking it mid-run. They're taking it beforehand to kind of give them that extra little boost of energy that they're going to take it, digest it. It's simple sugar. It's going right into the bloodstream and boom, it's going right to those muscles. There's no need to really break it down. So it's beneficial in that sense from a pre-fuel standpoint. Using a gel for shorter distances, I would say not necessarily really during the 5K is it needed. Maybe a 10K, kind of like a workout, you might do that midway through. It's going to be a little faster than your typical other longer distances. So it is good to see, hey, when I'm pressing down on this gas, am I able to digest this? Am I able to take this in? It's just going to give you that leg up to a competitor or to be able to finish that faster race or workout, however you're viewing it, feeling a little bit better without feeling so fatigued and your energy levels really low. So I would say a 10K, it's definitely possible to use a gel and incorporate that. And then definitely above that, you can incorporate a gel and help that to get more energy.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about longer races, talking half marathon and above. This person wants to know, is there any limit to the calories that one can consume? Or is it always the more the merrier kind of situation? Like, as long as my GI can handle it, should I just be cramming it in?
That is a great question. And I think this has become more a conversational or more part of conversation with brands like Morton, who put out gels and racing fuel that kind of pushes past that 200 grams or 200 calories per hour mark that we typically would recommend for a lot of individuals, is like an average, per hour, 200 calories, but they're pushing more like 400 calories, maybe 500 calories in some of their gels and their powders. So my recommendations with that is you can get upwards of, I'd say no more than like 300, 350 is where that max mark for like a half or full. Maybe the just a little bit further of a marathon, those distances. But when you start to get to like ultra marathons or multi-day events, it's not necessarily about getting that high level of calories every single hour. I would say you want to get more calories overall, but it doesn't necessarily need to be every hour getting 400 calories when you're doing beyond just a marathon distance. I would say aiming for more like 250 or between 250 and 300 for those beyond ultra distances, basically beyond a marathon. And there's also, your stomach has to be able to handle it. So you got to start small and build up to that point. I know in the marathon distance, Kipchoge can take in 400, 500 calories in an hour when he's racing. Well, did he start there? No, he had to build himself up to be able to take that in. And a lot of people can't. But the more you do practice and the more you can add that in, it is beneficial, but you don't need to like work yourself up to this amazing high amount of calories per hour to just get faster.
Gotcha. What about, so when you program for your athletes, do you say, hey, I want 200, 250, 300 for our goal in calories? Or do you say, hey, let's try and start for 20 grams of carbs during this run and let's build from there? Like how do you decide if your focus is going to be calories or carbs, or do you use a mix of both? And what do you see as more beneficial?
So I typically, in my practice, I use a mixture of both. I would say I probably use grams of carbs more frequently than calories. Just with a lot of people, grams of carbs tends to, when we talk about like psychologically and how it kind of falls for a lot of people, when we're talking about nutrition, it can be very sensitive subject. So I have found through my practice that talking in grams of carbs tends to sit better with a lot of athletes versus saying you have to eat this amount of calories in this hour. Because calories in our society, calories have a very different connotation than grams of something. Not all the time, but most of the time that's the case. So I would say for most marathon and under distances, I like to talk about in grams, versus ultra distance, I talk about in calories. So that's where it also too looks different, because in marathons and below, it is about simple carbohydrates most of the time. That's that quick, easy to digest. But when you get into those ultra distances, it could be a mixture of carbs and protein and some fat. So it's more of calorie based in that sense than it is going to be for marathon distances and below.
That makes total sense. So what is for a marathoner, half marathoner, what is your goal range of grams of carbs over the race distance?
So I typically say for the marathon distance or race, anything below that too, even, I would say anywhere from 40 grams of carbs upwards of 60. Some people can do 80 even too, but I would say average is anywhere from 40 to 60.
That makes sense. So let's talk about like whole foods. So this person is trying to transition, I should say, to eating more whole foods during their run, but they've had some difficulties, especially with like aid station foods and stuff. Like some people, trail runners, can just consume anything.
Yes.
But others do have more difficulty with it. Do you have a list that you like your go-to, these are going to digest well, 4, 3, 5 things, something like that, that you can say, hey, try these out?
Yeah, so I definitely think it depends on if what the distance is. Like you said, ultra runners, trail runners. With trail runners, you're going to get a gamut of different things on those aid stations. You can't always guarantee what's going to be there necessarily, but kind of staples that you can either take yourself and have for yourself, whether it's trail or road, I would say. And usually they would be on the table. First goes back to applesauce. Go-go squeezes are, that resealable kind of packages. There's a lot of options out there. You can use that as a good option to kind of have in your vest if you're carrying it. Or they're usually so small. Sometimes if you have a lot of pockets on your gear, you can use that pretty easily as well. So that's one option there. Another would be like bananas. Those are typically on the course most of the time. So that's usually a pretty easy to digest option. Some people will even do dried fruit, a little easier to carry on yourself, have like little Ziploc bags of those things, and use that. So dried fruit is an option. And also too, another kind of not really, I consider it a whole food, but some people might not, but like maple syrup, brands like Untapped is literally just straight maple syrup kind of gels, and it's still whole food. So if you're trying to make that transition, you can make that transition without necessarily, going too far from what a gel or typical sports food or delivery method of a sports food could be. So that's another thing you could always try to use if you want to make that transition to more whole foods based things. But yeah, those are kind of some of the more common ones from a whole foods based standpoint. If you're doing more trail running and stuff like that, you can always do like a PB&J. Sometimes that sits pretty well for some people when you're doing a longer distances on the trail, something like that. Uncrustables is a great way of doing that. That's a really common one. So that would be a great kind of quick grab and go option you could always incorporate there.
Love me some Uncrustables. So I'm going to read this next one so I don't mess anything up. But they're wondering specifically about how their nutrition might need to change after menopause, particularly if no hormone replacement therapy can be taken. And then does your answer, well, let me follow up with their second part of their question, but just that in general, like, are there any changes that you suggest or awarenesses that they might need to really incorporate into their nutritional needs after menopause without the option of hormonal therapy?
Yeah.
Replacement therapy, excuse me.
Yeah. So with menopause, I know that's one thing that, like, keeping that in mind, there's not a ton of research out there, but there is a little bit out there. So we kind of use our guidance on that little bit and expect that it might change over the years. But for now, the recommendations for post-menopause nutritional guidance is increase in total protein. This is something that women in general throughout the entire lifespan should have a good amount of protein. But when you do get to that post-menopausal state, increasing it ever so slightly can be very beneficial. So typically for postmenopausal women, when I'm working with them, I will usually do somewhere between 1.5 and 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight for a lot of them. So that's a lot higher than maybe where they were prior. So increasing total protein. Looking at more complex or low glycemic index carbohydrates is definitely the route to go. So this would mean you're naturally increasing total fiber as well. These would be avoiding a little bit more of those simple carbohydrates because of the shift in hormones that happen in menopause and then post-menopause. Your body doesn't respond as well to those simple carbohydrates. So we want carbs still. Carbs are not the enemy at that point, but we want to kind of shift to more low glycemic index because one of the kind of short end of the stick that women tend to get is they oftentimes can develop insulin resistance if they are continuing to consume kind of sugars or simple carbohydrates more often than if they are consuming more what we call low glycemic index, which I forgot to mention, that is basically what glycemic index is the amount of, it's a number that's given to food on how it impacts your blood sugar. So low glycemic index foods would be foods that are higher in fiber. And so thus they have less impact on that blood sugar. So those are a little bit better for postmenopausal women. The other thing I would say is meal timing is really important for that postmenopausal athlete. Making sure that you're really prioritizing recovery, specifically being a protein, especially after a workout quality session, anything like that, making sure you're getting at least 20 grams of protein 30 to 45 minutes after that session as a postmenopausal athlete is important at that point. So those are kind of the three big factors that I always like to use in my protocols with my my postmenopausal female athletes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So the person who asked that question also wanted to know if your answers drew off of the research by Stacy Sims, and if there's any other people that might be of interest if they want to read up on it more.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of it does come from Stacy Sims. I went through some of her certification trainings and things like that. As she is the primary person out there. One, she's most vocal about it, but two, she's kind of pushing a lot of that research. There's not too many other people that are as prominent as she is in like the research world or just bringing all that research in one place. So she is the primary person that I do get most of that information from. There are more coming up. I think she's kind of starting a revolution of women wanting to go into research in this area. But she is kind of the primary person that I follow. And fortunately, I don't have any others that I necessarily see in my research of what I see out there.
She's the one that influences me the most too when I see stuff like that. But you're right, she is very vocal, but it's very thorough quality research. And so it's great that she's vocal about that.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
So this person wants to know if they should be taking protein or including protein in the snack they have after they run. I know we just talked about that in the context of menopausal, postmenopausal individuals, but they want to know if they really need to eat within that 20 to 30 minute kind of frame of time. And, because sometimes GI just doesn't respond well right after we run. So if there's any suggestions you have on jumpstarting our GI system after we run, and if we need to adhere pretty religiously to a shorter period of time where we're getting in calories, and what should those calories consist of? Lots of questions in one. I can repeat that if you need me to.
No, it's good. They all kind of waterfall into each other, honestly. Yeah. So yes, you should include a protein source after a workout, after a run. And this is true for not just the quality sessions, but even your just like everyday sessions. I think it's important because your daily protein needs are going to stay fairly similar from day to day. And so if you can just start that jump start of refueling with protein, it's going to just help you so you're not trying to cram in a bunch of protein at the end of your day at one meal. So yes, your post recovery should include a protein source. For most individuals, I like to say if you're doing like a snack, if you're doing a small snack and then you're going to go have your big meal later on, including a little bit of protein, maybe it's like peanut butter or some nuts, or a protein type of granola bar, or some cheese, or some yogurt. I always like to take a little cooler whenever I go and do runs outside of the house, and I just need a little quick snack. So things like that can be really beneficial. If you're looking for a little more oomph and have like higher protein as well, things like core flour is a great option to incorporate. You can get lots of protein from that, and it's a liquid, which also is helpful if you are not hungry after a workout. Whether it's winter, summer, spring, any time of year, it is not uncommon for your hunger to be very suppressed after a workout, because we know that heat can impact that ghrelin hormone. But we also know working out suppresses that as well. So most people are not hungry after workouts, after runs. That's very common. But if you have big goals and you want to improve your recovery, you want to not be sore, you want to kind of, as I like to put it, seal the deal on that quality session that you did. You put in all that blood, sweat, and tears, improve by sealing it up with a protein source. So getting 20 grams of protein after something like that, coming like from a core power or coming from a recovery powder. My go-to oftentimes is using like Scratch Labs recovery, or there's Tailwind and those types of recovery powders, and making it with Fairlife milk. Boom, I got 20 grams of protein and I got some carbohydrates right in one, really easy, and it's liquid. So I'm getting some rehydration, got some electrolytes in there. It's really quick and easy, especially if I'm on the go or I'm out and about with my run. So yes, protein afterwards. Try to do it 30 to 45 minutes after, so you get a little bit larger window. 30 minutes is kind of that time frame. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes right away, but if you're going to be in the car for a little bit longer, kind of take that all into consideration. But doing it within 30 to 45 minutes is the important factor there.
I just had a vision of you with a cooler stuffed with food, just running around Chicago.
Oh yes, that's definitely me. And I usually have more than what I need for my own training, because I'm that soccer mom who's not a mom yet. And like, that's literally, I have all of that stuff ready to go. Like, oh, do you need some refuel? I've got refuel. You need some?
I have Scratch and Fairlife.
Exactly.
Please.
And I'm not sponsored by them either, guys. Like, that's literally just like a quick go-to that I oftentimes like to recommend. So
that's amazing. So last question, and then we have some time. So I was going to open it up to anyone here that would like to ask anything, as long as Lydia is okay with it. Getting some things kind of dropped on her. But the last question that we had was about supplements, and if there are any supplements that you recommend runners take no matter what. So whatever distance they run or gender or whatever it might be, if you're a runner, you need to take these supplements.
Yeah. So I'm not big on big general, like, this is what you should take, but with supplements, there are a few that I can generally say would be beneficial for any distance, any gender, any health concern, any predisposition, medications, things like that. The first would be a multivitamin. I think that is something that no matter who you are as an athlete, it is beneficial to have a multivitamin in your regular routine, in your daily routine. I know it's sometimes hard to remember to take supplements, but athletes at any distance, they tend to struggle with getting enough of certain micronutrients. Vegetables are not the go-to thing for a lot of athletes. We're going for things that are protein or carbs or those types of things. We're not getting as many leafy greens sometimes, or greens in general. That's why other brand green powders are so popular right now. But what I would say is a multivitamin can be a really great thing to kind of bridge that gap of what you need without having to pinpoint exactly, oh, I need this or this. You can do that. But if we're just talking generally, a multivitamin is a great thing to incorporate. For women too, there's seen some research and some recommendations that even whether you're planning on, no matter what stage of life you might be in, a prenatal vitamin could be very beneficial for a lot of female athletes, whether you decide you're using it for the purpose of, eventually getting pregnant. But because of the heightened amount of certain nutrients in a prenatal versus just an everyday, that's actually more beneficial for women oftentimes. There's usually a little more iron in there. There's usually a little bit more folic acid, like all of these things that are going to be beneficial for a woman as an endurance athlete. So that's another thing you could also do as a female there. The other one that I generally recommend across the board would be a probiotic. Now, does that mean just go grab any probiotic off the shelf? No, not necessarily. You'd want to incorporate a probiotic that is beneficial for overall general gut health, because there's so many different strains out there. I like to get more specific with individuals if I'm meeting with them, like if you're dealing with GI issues like diarrhea on runs, or dealing with bloating or gas or those sorts of things. There's different strains to deal with that. But a general probiotic generally has at least 2 to 3 of the crucial bacteria that would be needed for an endurance athlete. The first is bifidobacterium, is like that first part of the strain, and then there's other kind of additional parts or additional options. But bifidobacterium and then lactobacillus are 2 of the big ones you'd want to see as the precursor on whatever probiotic you're taking. So that would be the other one. The third one that I would say, generally speaking, can be pretty beneficial. Some might be different depending on if you're on any like blood thinning medications or things like that. But omega-3 can be beneficial for a lot of individuals just because it's going to be adding in at least 1 gram of omega-3 into your day-to-day. And when we don't eat fish all the time, depending on your location in the country or in the world, then that's something to kind of keep in mind because it can improve your recovery time and help with just other biological functions in your body as well. So those would be the 3 that I would recommend across the board for most individuals.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Before we go to our outro, does anyone here have any questions, anything that like was stimulated during our call that you want to follow up on? It is open for anyone to ask anything of Lydia. Sorry, Lydia. I didn't say
fine.
that this is.
I'm in the hot seat. That's fine.
You are.
I just answered everything so well, apparently.
I know. If anybody has a race coming up and wants to know about some specifics. But if not, we'll go on. I'll give you all about 10 more seconds to jump in, and then if not, that's cool. Can you hear my daughter?
Yes.
She's like, Mama, huggy. 1 second, baby. I'll be there in a moment.
Answer that question, unfortunately.
Evelyn has a question for you.
Yes.
It's about gummies and pirate booty and how much she can consume a day. Anyway, thank you so much. It's always just a huge pleasure and so beneficial for you to be here and just, answer all of our questions and give us such thorough information. We really, really, really appreciate it. I know someone, Reza, you used to raise your hand. Okay, no.
I think he meant to clap, but he raised his hand and then he clapped.
If anyone wants to work or connect with Lydia on an individual basis, I know some people already do that are on the team. We actually have quite a few that work with you now. But if anyone else would like to connect with her more on a more one-on-one basis, how would they contact you? What's the best way for you?
Yeah, so there's a couple different avenues that you can reach out to me. Obviously, Asher has my contact information. So if you ever are like having that conversation on a coaching call, just be like, hey, can you send me that? And she usually does really great intros and stuff like that for me. But reaching out to me via Instagram. So my handle is Fuel with Nader. Still my maiden name. I haven't even changed it, and I'm probably not going to. But Fuel with Nader is my Instagram handle, so you can always reach out there. Or email is always another great avenue as well. Lydia at fuelwithnader.com. So there's lots of different ways you can kind of contact me there. And then just Google Lydia Nader registered dietitian. You'll pop up with my website as well. So you can always communicate with me through my website. So those are the different avenues you can communicate with me. And I'll also just kind of say as well that from a one-on-one standpoint, I know a lot of times in these avenues, people always assume that it's just only monthly coaching. That is something that is done just from what we've experienced working with run coaches, working with other professionals in this arena. But I also do offer one-off sessions. Like Asher kind of said at the beginning, sometimes we just need that like tweak of things, or we just need like someone with the experience and the knowledge to go over our racing plan or to go over things. Or we just have one little thing we need a little tweak on. I do that as well. So it's not only monthly coaching and working with people for a couple months or a couple years or continuing to work with them. It's also like one-off sessions. So if that's something that you're interested in as well, that's something I also offer, which is not always the case out there in this realm.
Yeah, and it's really important because I agree, like it is very difficult to find a dietitian who will offer just those singular sessions where you can be like, hey, I'm not doing well with these kind of gels. Can you offer, like, do you know some others that I might, or X, Y, or Z, whatever it might be. It's very difficult to find somebody who is willing to be that flexible. And we appreciate that you are because it's just nice. It's a nice option to have, especially when people just need different things. And oftentimes it's only a tweak here or there, like you said. So I want to thank you again, and thank everyone here for coming. I am recording this, so if you need to go back and listen to any particular part, I'll try to post it in the next 10 or so minutes. We have some extra time, so I'll do that now. Otherwise, thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. And Lydia, we'll see you soon, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, you guys, for having me and the great questions as well. It's always a joy to come talk to you guys.
Have a great one, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yay, I got to stop recording.